Yo, what up everybody, it's Stewart, and today is another Metagore Monday, and according to that title, we are talking about the different races within my story. This video is just going to cover the 23 races that are definitely within my world. I might add more later on, depending, the different lands, different cultures, different races I might add in. But what I have right now, there are 23, and that's what I'm going to talk about at the moment. And before we get started, I want to talk about how some of these races are generally depicted as male only or female only. All of these are both male and female races. As well as, even though some of these races are generally depicted as more demonic-like beings, like a succubus or an imp or a demon or something, in my world, I try to create them neutral. There are some more demonic-like characters that might happen to be a demon or something. Take Darius, for example. He is very controlling and aggressive, but in general, I try to create the races as neutral beings, and then just the characteristics of the people make them good or bad. Also in my world, they was created mostly one at a time. There was a couple times that there might have been bunch of different races might have been created at once or at the same time or whatever, but most of them were kind of made at one point in time in history and then later another one, and they are referred to as children in that regard, so I will be referred to them as that as well. The first children was the first race that was created. The second children was the race that was created after that. If you want to know more about kind of that history or whatever, there's a link down below of a history of kind of like in the beginning of my world, like the creation of the world and the creation of the different races and stuff, and kind of explain some of that for y'all. So the first children were the Elestrians, or Ellies for short. They are basically like my elemental race in a sense. Their average height is 6 foot 6 inches. Their average lifespan is infinite. They are not immortal. They can be killed, but they just don't grow old and die. They could get sick with something like the plague or something and die. People can, stab them to death or whatever. They can die. They just don't grow old and die. And they live in about any kind of environment. They don't have, only live in this type of biome or whatever. They can survive in multiple ones. They appear slightly larger than an elf. They have the pointed ears. They have usually a golden or bronze type of creamy skin complexion. I kind of think of like Egyptians, how they used to be kind of depicted and painted up, almost like that metallic-y type of skin tone. These are like my elementals, so they have the magical abilities of either fire, water, earth, or wind, as well as their eyes match whatever element they are. They have just solid eye colors. They don't have irises or pupils or anything like that. It's just one solid color. The fire elementals have like a ruby red color. The water elementals would have like a deep blue. And then the earth elementals would have bright green eyes. And then the air elementals have a purple colored eyes. The second children are gems. Their average height is 9 feet 6 inches. Their average lifespan is about 5,000 years. And just like the elementals, or the Elestrians, they can live in any kind of biome. They are very tall beings. Like I said, they're 9 feet 6 inches. They have vibrant skin and hair color. So you might have like a blue skin gen or green skin, red, yellow, whatever, something that really pops. As well as their hair, it could be very vibrant. It doesn't have to be. There are some that just have like black or white, but there are also some that have red or purple or whatever colored hair as well. Their eyes are solid white with a black pupil in the center. And they are one of the two actual races that I classify as a sorcerer type. Not counting the Elestrians, because they only have magical abilities with that one particular element that they are. So if they're a fire Elestrian, they only have fire abilities. Djinns and liches, they can do more with their magical powers than what Elestrians could. The third children are elves. Their average height is about 6 feet. Their average lifespan is 1,000 years. And if you'll notice, these lifespans slowly go down as they was created. That was just kind of also mentioned in that history. Each one that was created, their lifespan got a little bit shorter and shorter. But anyways, elves, they can live in any kind of biome. They do not have any magical abilities or anything. They're just basically my version of a human with pointed ears because I don't want humans in my world. That's about as close as you're gonna get. You know, they have human colored eyes, human colored hair, human colored skin tones, all the way from Caucasian to like African American type skin tones. You know, you have your regular elves, and then once you start getting towards the more browns and blacks, some of them even kind of got like an ashy gray type color. Those are referred to as my dark elves. There's really nothing different except just the title between those two, an elf and a dark elf, except their skin color, as well as dark elves usually have red or yellow eyes. The fourth children are liches. Like I said with the jinns, they also possess magical abilities. Their average height is 6 feet 3 inches. Their average lifespan is 800 years, and they as well can live in any biome. So they're not, you know, segregated just by region or environment. A lich, like I said, is a sorcerer with powers, but their powers are actually stronger than a jinn's. When liches are born and they appear to be elven. They look, you know, humanoid with the pointed ears, but as they use their powers, their body ages and starts to decay, all the way until the point that their skin rots off and they're just a skeleton. They can still live as a skeleton, but you know, it's a little bit more torturous for them, especially if the organs and stuff start failing and, you know, decaying and falling out. You know, they'll be hungry, but they can't really eat anything because they don't have any stomach to digest it, so they will always be hungry. Same thing with thirst and other stuff like that. And then once a lich actually gets to the end of their life, whether they're about to be killed, whether they get sick and starting to die, whether they just grow old and whatever, once they get to that point where they are about to die, they have a choice they can make on reincarnating themselves with another type of race, which are called Dresdes, which I'll get to that later. So if they choose to become a Dresde, they can do that then. They can't do it any other point in their life, but right when they're about to die, they can choose not to die and become a Dresde. The fifth children are Selkies. Selkies average height about 5 feet 10 inches, and their average lifespan is about 600 years. They usually live anywhere close to water because they are typically known as aquatic type creatures. None of my races actually live in water because I want them all land, you know, based, kind of like in our world almost, in a sense. I don't want to have any cities underwater or anything like that. So they live near waters and rivers and this and that, but they live on land. They are pictured as Selks, which is a fantasy version of a seal. That's where Selkie came from. And they are depicted as those Selks that are able to transform into an elf type being. And they kind of transform from a Selk to a elfin being by taking off their Selk type of skin. And then when they remove it, it kind of looks like they're actually wearing clothes made out of silk, whether it's like pants or a shirt or whatever. But they basically take off the skin or disguise and become the elven form, and then they can put the disguise back on to look like a silk. The sixth children are tree folk. Their average height is about 10 feet, which is the tallest of all my races. Their average lifespan is also 600, just like the Selkies. They typically live in forests, plains, swamps, and maybe some in the mountains, as long as there's foliage around. So they're not really in deserts or like volcanic wastelands or anything like that. But anywhere that there's foliage and other trees, that's usually where they reside. Tree folks have thick legs, almost like trunks of trees. Their arms are like giant branches with branches as fingers and such. They have wood and bark for skin. They are literally a humanoid tree in a sense. They also have vines and leaves and twigs and, you know, maybe little blossoms or whatever sprouting off of their body. They do not bleed, sweat, or cry tears. All of those equivalent liquids are tree sap. So if they get cut, their blood is actually tree sap. When they cry, they're crying sap. In the center of their torso is a giant seed. Once a tree folk dies and their body starts to kind of decay and such, that seed will stay there and it will actually grow into an actual tree. So it's like their version of a tombstone in a sense. You know, wherever they die or their body rests, you know, their body will decay and a tree will actually sprout there. The seventh children are dryads. Their average height is about 5 feet 8 inches. They usually live basically like the same as the tree folk, anywhere that there's foliage. And their average lifespan is 400 years, as well as their plant's lifespan is 400 years. And I'll get to that here in a minute. Dryads typically look like elves, with patches of their skin actually being bark or other rough stem-like texture. So they look like a mixture almost. They don't really look tree-like like tree folks, and they don't look elven. They're like a mixture in a sense. They do have vines and branches that can grow out of their skin and such. They are born from a seed instead of being birthed like, most mammals and such are. They are born more like a bird and an egg. That's basically what their seed is an egg, and they hatch from it once they reach, I guess a mature time to actually hatch. I don't know the actual term, but yeah. Once they hatch from their seed grows into a plant. Like how I said, the tree folk, when they die, their seed of core will sprout a plant. A dryad's eggshell type of seed will also sprout a plant while they are actually alive. And that is referred to as their plant. If a dryad dies before its plant's lifespan is up, because like I said, they have a 400-year lifespan and their plant has a 400-year lifespan. So therefore, it's the same in a sense. It does get a little tricky because it can actually offset some. I'm about to get into that. But if they die before their tree hits, or their plant reaches that 400-year lifespan, they actually regrow from that plant. They can respawn in a sense at whatever age that they actually died at. They're not born in another seed or anything, but they can basically dissolve out of that plant and respawn in a sense there, up to a 200-year life. So if the dryad is actually older than that 200 years, when they die and their plant is not 400 years yet, they respawn at 200. And that's how that can reset, because they still have 200 years left, but their plant might only have, 100 or something, depending on when they died. And they can just keep doing that as much as needed until their plant reaches that 400 years and dies, and then they can't respawn. Once they die, they're dead forever. Also, every 20 years, the dryad's plants can produce a new bud or a new seed, which the dryad can go and plant anywhere that they want, and will also create another plant. But it is not classified as their plant, it's classified as the bud plant. Bud plants cannot be used to respawn once the dryad dies. They can only respawn at their plant. But the bud plants can be used as a way of fast travel. Like I said, they kind of just dissolve out of their plant once they die. That's how they respawn. They basically just kind of pull apart from the plant and they're there again. The bud plant is used as a fast travel method, and that's basically how it is. They can fast travel, they can just touch either their plant or another bud plant and dissolve into it, and then dissolve out of a different plant somewhere else, but it's only theirs. If there's another dryad that has some plants, you can't use their plants to fast travel. It's only yours, whether it's your real plant or if it's a plant that's sprouted from the bud. So every 20 years you get a new bud. So out of 400 years, you got basically what, 20? Yeah, about 20 buds, 20 plants you get to add on to that. So that's technically 21 plants you can kind of fast travel between. So you might want to spread them out. You could even spread it out across the entire globe if you want to, travel across the oceans or whatever. And it's a way of fast travel. A children is an incubus and a succubus, or incubi and succubi for plural. Their average height is about 6 feet. Their average lifespan is 250 years. And they can live in about any kind of biome. Incubi and succubi are typically very attractive looking. There are a few that don't really fall into that category, but in general they are very attractive looking beings. They appear to be elven with the pointed ears and all, but they have a pair of feathered wings growing from their backs. Even though they have the capability to fly with their wings, they usually tend not to, because it takes too much energy for them to actually fly especially long distances. If they need to scale a wall or something, they might fly over that. If they want to try to hurry up and they don't want to run, they might be able to fly a short distance. But to actually travel in the air for long distances, it just takes too much effort for them to do that. So they usually use their wings either for, extra pair of arms if they're just trying to hold something. Not really like hold something like that, but I know it's referenced a couple times. They kind of wrap their arm around somebody, they can wrap their wing around it, as well as maybe they use it for shade if it's really hot, where they can kind of hold their wing up and kind of block it from their face, such like that. So the ninth children are trolls. Their average height is 7 feet. Their average lifespan is also 250 years. And they can as well live in about any kind of environment. Trolls are not really intelligent for, in general. Some of them are, but as a whole, they're not very smart. They are typically very rugged looking. They're not very attractive. And they usually have very thick, hard skin. And they also will eat about any type of material, especially if they get really hungry. They typically eat food, but once, if they're not around actual food, they will eat rocks or wood or metal or bones or whatever they can find like that, and they will actually eat it and their body can digest it and such. The 10th children are Criders. Criders is a race that I've not really made up, but I kind of took ideas of Finfolk and such and kind of tweaked it and called it a Crider because I didn't like the term Finfolk, because when I hear Finfolk, I kind of usually think of merfolk as well, which usually references like mermaids and mermen, and that's not what Criders are. They are more aquatic type beings, so more fish-like in a sense, or more reptilian or amphibious. They don't have to really just be fish. That's what most of them are that I've written about, but they could be reptilian or amphibious or something. Their average height is 6 feet 10 inches, and their average lifespan is 200 years. They can live basically like selkies, somewhere close to water. They don't have to, but that's more preferred for them since they are somewhat aquatic. Like I said, they have aquatic type characteristics of various types of fish and stuff. They are able to walk on land and swim underwater with ease because they have a set of lungs and gills, so they can breathe in and out of water, no problems. Their skin is usually like fish scales or lizard scales or something, or that silky type of texture like on frogs or like on octopuses and stuff like that, and other animals of the sense. Their eyes are usually solid black, and they don't have any hair. The 11th children are demons. Demons' average height is 6 foot 2 inches. Their average lifespan is 170 years. They typically live in more humid climates like deserts and volcanic wastelands and such, mainly because they are cold-blooded. And if they are in cold climates for too long, they could suffer from hypothermia rather quickly and die. So they have to have a source of heat or be in warmer climates. Demons do not have actual noses. They have more of a nasal cavity, which is kind of like a bat nose in a sense, but it's basically, the shape of the skull where the nose would go, but it's kind of sunken in or whatever. They have horns growing out of their forehead, kind of like in the temple area. Each demon's horns could be different, whether in length or size or shape even. Some might grow straight out this way, some might grow straight forward, some might kind of curl back. Darius's is more kind of curls to the side like rams. It just depends on the demon itself, like genetics in a sense. But they do have 2 horns growing from their forehead. They are not born with their horns. Their horns are cut like an infant would cut teeth. So when demons are born, they don't have horns, and as they grow older, they have to cut them like they do their teeth and such. Their skins varies in color. It's usually on like grayscale from like white for like more of an albino type look to pitch black, but usually somewhere in between like a dark gray or ashy gray type texture. Their skin is also very thick, and they are actually fireproof, so they do not burn their body might sweat when they're in heat or whatever, but they don't feel the heat. They could literally stand in a pile, like in a fire or whatever, and not burn. And demons usually have red or yellow eyes. The 12 children are Lamia, or Lamiae for plural. Their average height is 5 feet 6 inches. Their average lifespan is 150 years. They typically live in deserts, forests, plains, or swamps. They usually don't live in like volcanic wastelands because that's a little bit too hot for them. And they usually don't live like in snowy mountains because they are somewhat reptilian. So, you know, they can't live in too cold of climates either. But they're not on the extreme as demons would be. Lamia has the torso of an elf and the lower half and tail of a serpent. They are cold-blooded beings. Like I said, they can't live like mountains and such. They also have the inability to close their eyes because they are somewhat reptilian, and a lot of reptiles don't close their eyes when they sleep, so they sleep with their eyes open. And also they do have the hood on their face, like their flats, I think is what they're called. I don't know. Whatever this muscle is above your shoulder and your neck, it is actually like a snake hood in a sense for them. They are also capable of growing hair up on their head. As well as being part snake, they do have to shed their skin, or at least their scales, every so often, and they usually do it once a season, so about 4 times a year they shed their scales. The 13th children are Morlings. Morlings is another one that I kind of did my own adaptation to a different type of race and just kind of changed the name. Originally I was going to call it Morphling because they do morph, but I decided to take off the PH and just leave it as Morling. Their average height is 6 foot 6 inches. Their average lifespan is 145 years. And they can live in basically any kind of biome. A Morling appears elfin. You wouldn't know that they're not an elf unless they do morph. They are a shapeshifter. They can only shapeshift into one particular animal, and it's just assigned to them genetically. So one Morling might be able to shapeshift into a dragon, another one might only be able to shapeshift into like a unicorn or something. So it just depends your genetics and exactly, you know, what animal you can shapeshift into. They do not naturally know how to transform. They can't just do it, you know, consciously at first. It is something that they have to learn how to actually do. They have to learn how to connect to their animal spirit, as they put it. That's what they refer to as their animal form, is their animal spirit. Once they learn how to become one with their animal spirit, they are able to transform into the animal as many times as they want and then back to their elven form. The animal spirit that they are actually represented by has magical abilities. They do not actually obtain that magical ability. There's not that many actual wildlife that actually has magical abilities in a sense, but there are some, and if they can transform into those, they do not obtain those magical abilities. They transform into a dragon, they can still fly because that's part of their, you know, physical structure to be able to, you know, flap their wings and such. And it is believed that if a Morling stays in their animal spirit for too long, that the mind of that animal could override the mind of the Morling, and they would be stuck there believing that they are actually that animal for the rest of their lives. So they can't just stay in their animal form for a long period of time, especially when they are younger and are just learning to kind of tap into their animal spirit and become one. That is very much of a threat to them. So they want to just do a little bit at a time, and as they get older and get more used to it, then they can stay longer because they know how to control it. The 14th children are Minotaurs. Minotaurs' average height are about 7 feet. Their average lifespan is 140 years, and they can live in about any kind of biome. A Minotaur appears to be a steer or a cow that stands on its hind legs, and its front legs and kind of torso are more elven in a sense. They're usually a lot thicker and bulkier than what an elf would be, but they do have like the elven or human type torso and hands. The male Minotaurs are more steer-like with the steer horns, you know, coloration, more browns and such. There are some white ones. They have a tail, they have hooves on their feet, while the female Minotaurs are more cow-like with the udders on their stomach. There's a little bit of difference between the two, but they're both still Minotaurs, just one's male, one female, one has udders and one doesn't. The 15th children are centaurs. Their average height is about 8 feet. They live on average 115 years, and they typically live in either snowy regions, deserts, forests, or plains. Not as much mountain because of the slope and the terrain and stuff, and not as much in the swamps because it's hard for them to walk in muddy type waters a lot. The centaur is basically the upper torso and head is like elven, and then the actual lower half of the body is a equine, which a horse. Their eye color ranges from blue, green, brown. Hair color ranges from white, black, brown, red, and blonde. So it's basically human eyes, human hair. It's basically from the waist up it's human, and then the bottom half is a horse. The 16th children are sirens. Sirens' average height is 6 foot 2 inches, and their average lifespan is 110 years. They usually live around water, just like the selkies and the criders, somewhere near water. Sirens are usually very attractive, just like the incubi and the succubi generally are. They are able to breathe in and out of water because they also have a set of lungs and gills. I depict my sirens without a nose, but it's more kind of flat with little slits to act as gills, as well as their nasal to breathe in through their lungs that way, as well as their gills, so they don't have two separate breathing areas. Like unlike criders, I have it more with a nose for the lungs and then gills on the side of the neck. They appear to be elven, except for their nose, obviously. And once they actually start getting wet, that's when you start to see more of the siren characteristics. Once they get wet, their skin kind of starts dissolving into scales, and if their legs start getting wet, they kind of start growing scales and forming together into a tail. And then as they dry off, their scales will dissolve back into flesh, and their tail will separate into two legs. The 17th children are satyrs and fawns. Their average height is about 6 foot 8 inches. Their average lifespan is 100 years, and they typically live in forest and plains. Satyrs and fawns generally have an elven torso. For satyrs, their bottom half is more goat-like with a goat tail. They usually have 2 horns and generally have curly hair. Not always, but a lot of times it's pretty curly. As well as they usually have a thick beard. That's just kind of what they're attracted to, I guess. The fawns, on the other hand, they have an elven torso, but their bottom half is more of like a stag or a deer. And then their face kind of resembles that, more of a deer and then a goat, so it's a little bit different. Their horns are more like small little stubs, if any, and their coloration is more like a doe, as well as their tail is more of a little stub or, a deer tail. Unlike the satyrs being an actual long goat-like tail. The 18th children are hobgoblins. Their average height is 5 feet 6 inches, and their average lifespan is 85 years. And they can live in about any kind of environment. They are slightly smarter than the regular goblin, which I'll get to later, but they are still below par with intelligence. Their face is more muzzled-like than average, and their posture is usually kind of hunched over, and their body is usually covered in a lot of hair. And their eyes differ from being blue, green, brown, and even red. The 19 children are ogres. Their average height is 9 feet 3 inches, and their average lifespan is 85 years. And they typically live in forest and swamp type of regions. An ogre is usually depicted as not very attractive, especially to other races. Their bottom jaw does protrude out a little bit with an underbite, as well as their canines on their bottom jaw are more like tusks. They usually have a disproportionately large head compared to the rest of their body, a lot of hair. Their skin is usually green or red colored, and they have a large appetite. And just like trolls, they are more likely to eat rocks and wood and metal and such if they get hungry and there's not actual food around. The 20th children is a cyclops, or cyclopes for plural. Their average height is 7 feet 10 inches. Their average lifespan is 70 years, and they typically live in like mountain type regions. And a cyclops is a very large, bulky humanoid figure with a giant eye in the center of their head. And they usually have pale skin tones. The 21st children are goblins. Goblins' average height is about 5 feet. Their average lifespan is 55 years. and they can live in about any kind of biome. Goblins usually have a very low intelligence level, even lower than hobgoblins, and they are usually very arrogant and think that they are better than everybody in a sense. Not always, like I said, the neutral thing, but the majority of them do. They have elongated noses, elongated hands, and elongated feet. Their skin is a faint washed out green tint, and they generally have brown or red eyes. The 22nd children are imps. Imps' average height are about 4 feet 6 inches, and their average lifespan is only 20 years. They also, like demons, only live in warmer climates, so generally deserts and volcanic top wastelands. As well as they share a lot of other characteristics with demons. They are very cold-blooded creatures that can't live in cold climates because they would suffer from hypothermia a lot quicker than other races. As well as they are fireproof, just like the demons. They can step in lava or in fire and not feel burned or anything like that. They might sweat, but they don't feel the heat, and their body isn't damaged by the heat. They also have a bunch of tiny horns. Unlike the demons that have 2 horns going out of their temples, imps have a line of horns acting like eyebrows in a sense, as well as on their cheeks. Just like demons, they have to cut their horns, so they're not born with them. They're born with smooth faces, and as they age, they cut their horns just like they would their teeth. And their horns aren't as long as what demons could be. Like I said, Darius has large ram-like horns. Others might have really long horns. Imps' horns are very small and just kind of about the size of a fingertip in a sense. So literally about that much off of their face. So it's not very long, but there is a lot of them. And then the last race that I have created for the time being, like I said, I might create more as my world gets more fleshed out. But as of right now, this is the last race, and it's not really classified as like the 23rd children, but Dresdes are actually referred to children of the night. And that kind of goes into some of their characteristics, which I'm about to get into. Their average height is 6 feet 6 inches. Their lifespan is infinite, like the Elestrians. They don't grow old and die. They can be killed. You can kill them. They could, be stabbed to death or whatever and die that way, but they don't grow old. They can live in any kind of biome as well. Dresdes are light skinned, usually whites and grays. They have red or yellow eyes. They have jagged bat-like ears. They don't have lips. Their mouths are full with fang-like teeth. And they have a black forked tongue. They have long claw-like hands and fingernails. Their fingernails are about as long and sharp as their fangs. Dresdes are former liches. I mentioned this earlier when I was talking about liches. Once a lich reaches the end of their life, they have the option of becoming a Dresde or just dying. So they can use their last bit of magic to form themselves a new body and become a Dresde, but they don't have any of the magical abilities that they had as a lich. Like I said, liches are one of the 2 sorcerer type of races. They can have all these different magical abilities that they could use. Once they become a Dresde, they do not have those abilities. They lose them all. But they do obtain the ability to travel unseen in shadows and darkness and such, which is why they're referred to as children of the night, because they can, literally live in darkness and nobody can see them. Once they step into a shadow, their body just kind of dissolves and fades away, and they could hide in those shadows. They can also fast travel through shadows in a sense. So if there's like a 50-foot long building with a shadow being casted, they can literally step into the shadow on one end and step out of the shadow on the other end in the same step in a sense. So they can fast travel through the shadow. They can't go from one shadow to another, but they can go the length of that shadow, or they could just hide within that shadow if they want. Dresdes are also known to be very cannibalistic, and they tend to stay in packs and hunt in packs. But they have to have a pack leader that is not a Dresde, which can also form a problem for them. Because Dresdes, once a lich becomes a Dresde, they lose everything from their memory that they once knew as a lich. They are basically born new with no memories from their former life, as well as not knowing how to speak any of the actual languages except Gortese. Gortese is the only language that created for a race, and only Dresdes know this, and they just inhabitantly know this. They don't have to learn it or anything. It's just ingrained into them. They just automatically know how to speak it and understand it. No other race knows that. You can study and learn the language, but you don't just naturally know it. And it's not just spoken amongst people. It's only spoken with Dresdies, or if you actually learn it, and then you could speak with the Dresdies. And that is how they have to have their leader. They cannot have a Dresdi as their pack leader. They have to have someone who actually learned it and leads them that way, because Dresdies are not independent at all. They have to be told when to eat, otherwise they will literally starve themselves to death. So like I said, if you're a Lich and you're about to die, you have this ability to become a race that could live forever, you know. You don't grow old, but you don't remember anything. You can't communicate with anybody except your own kind. And if you don't have anybody around that can actually speak Cortese to tell you when to eat, you're going to be miserable, because you don't know when to eat, because you can't, you know, determine that yourself. They are very small-minded beings in that regards. But yeah, that's all 23 races that I have created so far for my Lands of the Abyss world. I might create more as time goes on, but for the time being, those are those races. Next month's Metagore Monday will be about the wildlife, which there are more wildlife than there are races. So yeah, just a heads up. But if you enjoy this, you know, click that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, ring that bell so you know when I upload videos, and you know, comment down below. Let me know what race you like the most out of these. If you know a race that I don't have in my world that you think would be cool for me to include later on, as I expand more into the world of my Lands of the Abyss, then comment that down below. You know, I'm always open to new creatures, new things to add into my world, new whatever. Go ahead and comment that down below. Check that out. I got some histories up on my blog. All those links are down below. You can go check that out. My book, The Battle for Metagore, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all those places. There are also linked down below, so go click on all that. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, here on YouTube. I have a Patreon account. You can go support me on there. The lowest tier is just $1, and you unlock all the access to all my exclusive content on there. So just go and, you know, support me if you want, all that fun stuff. And yeah, I'll see y'all next video. Peace out. Everybody love everybody.